You know, ever since we first started building civilizations, there's been this deep-seated, fundamental urge we all have to see what's over the horizon, to connect, to exchange things, to trade. It's an instinct that's literally woven into our history, a force that has built empires and really defined who we are. But this powerful impulse, it's always been a double-edged sword.
And you've got to understand, right from the get-go, these ancient paths weren't just roads or rivers. They were the lifelines of the ancient world, pulsating arteries for everything that makes us human. And there's this grand, almost romantic promise in that, right? A promise of a world brought closer together.
Sure, we were moving silk and spices, of course, but we were also moving philosophies, religions, brand new technologies. Every single merchant caravan, every ship that set sail, it wasn't just carrying cargo. It was carrying the seeds of change, proving that commerce was never, ever, just about the bottom line. It was about building a shared world. But here's the thing. There's always been a tension at the heart of this story. A really stark contrast between the beautiful ideal of connection and the often brutal reality of its human cost. You've got the life-giving rivers that cradled our first cities on one hand, and on the other, the hidden, grim labor camps that house the builders of our modern wonders.
And look, this dark side, it's not some modern invention. Nope. It's a pattern that's as old as trade itself. The very same routes that connected us also became the fault lines for some of our biggest conflicts.
So, we all have this romantic picture of the Silk Road, right? Peaceful caravans, a beautiful exchange of cultures. But the truth? It was a geopolitical chessboard. If you could control the route, you controlled the wealth. And if you controlled the wealth, you pretty much controlled the world.
And this game, it was played on a massive, totally ruthless scale. I mean, empires would empty their treasuries just to control one single mountain pass. Rival cities like Venice and Genoa actually funded private wars to burn each other's ports to the ground. And out on the high seas, it was a constant free-for-all with pirates and state-sponsored hijackers. Greed has always been a silent partner in the business of trade.
Okay, so let's fast forward to today. You'll find that those ancient patterns, that exploitation, that conflict, they haven't gone away. Not at all. They've just changed their clothes.
All right, let's take a look at Dubai, a city that just seems to have exploded out of the desert, a true modern marvel. But its gleaming skyline is built on a pretty staggering foundation. About 85% of its entire population is made up of foreign workers.
So how does this even happen? Well, it usually starts with a promise of a better life and good pay. But for so many, that dream just evaporates the moment they arrive. Their passports are taken, they're shipped off to isolated labor camps and get tangled up in this horrible cycle of debt. And the local laws, often part of something called the kafala system, they offer very little protection.
And this is what's truly shocking. For many, the typical monthly salary for someone cleaning the five-star hotels or building the next world record skyscraper is about $200. Now think about that. In a city where the cost of living is just, it's through the roof. A salary like that creates an impossible situation. A tiny studio apartment costs more than 7 times what they earn in a month, so they're forced into these crowded, often squalid, shared living spaces just to get by.
But the price of global trade, it's not just paid by workers in developing nations. In the industrial heartlands of the developed world, entire communities have been just hollowed out. This quote from a steelworker in West Virginia, it just captures that deep sense of loss, of a whole way of life that just vanished.
And when you look at the numbers, they're just staggering. In Weirton, a town literally built on steel, jobs in the industry fell from a peak of 14,000 all the way down to less than 1,000. That's what global competition can look like at the local level. A legacy torn down, a community left to figure out what's next.
So what this all points to is a really fundamental truth about globalization. It is not a simple story. It creates winners and losers, often in the very same breath, and the line between them can get incredibly blurry.
And to really see this in action, let's just look at two very different places. On one side, you have Duisburg, Germany, a classic Rust Belt city that took a huge gamble to become the European hub for China's big Belt and Road Initiative. And on the other side, you have Peru, a country that's overflowing with natural resources, but where most people don't see a dime of that wealth.
See, Duisburg played its cards incredibly well. They welcomed Chinese investment to bring their port back to life, but they did it very carefully. They saw what happened in other countries, these so-called debt traps, and they were wary. Their strategy is really a masterclass in modern geopolitics. Make alliances for sure, but never ever give up your independence.
Peru, on the other hand, it's a completely different story. The country's massive wealth, all that copper, gold, fish, it's mostly extracted by foreign powers, especially China. All the profits flow out of the country, leaving something like 70% of the population to just fend for themselves in an informal economy, with zero security or government support.
But here's where it gets interesting. Where the big global systems have failed, some smaller, ground-up solutions are showing a real glimmer of hope. I'm talking about microloans. The idea is simple. Give small amounts of money directly to poor entrepreneurs, people who don't have collateral, and trust them to build their own businesses from scratch.
And the result? Well, listen to this. This quote is from the widow of a man who used one of those microloans to build a small factory that makes gas stoves. After all the traditional banks slammed the door in their face, they became so successful that those very same banks came knocking. It's just an amazing story of empowerment.
So when we pull the camera back and look at the big picture, we start to see this timeless pattern emerge. A pattern that connects the ancient world to our own in ways that are, frankly, both fascinating and a little unsettling.
The names change, the technology changes, sure, but the core conflict, it's exactly the same. It doesn't matter if it was Bronze Age empires battling over tin and copper, or Rome fighting for spice routes, or today's nations competing for supply chains. The struggle is fundamentally the same.
And that right there is the game in a nutshell. It's this powerful engine for progress, for moving goods and spreading ideas. But at the same time, it consistently creates these huge gaps in wealth and power, which, you guessed it, almost always leads to conflict. Both sides of that coin are always there.
And that really is the big takeaway here. That beautiful, powerful promise of a connected world has always had a shadow, a human cost. And this isn't some bug in the system that we can fix. In so many ways, it seems to be a built-in feature, one we've been living with for thousands of years.
So, as we build new trade routes, not with ships, but with fiber optic cables and digital marketplaces, a really big question remains. We've completely redrawn the map of the world, but have we actually changed the rules of the game? That's something worth thinking about.